This conference will now be recorded.
Now that we have a quorum, I knew there would be a big turnout for Nick Anderson. Nick Anderson, ladies and gentlemen.
Hi.
But before we do that, I'd like to meet Todd. Todd, will you introduce yourself to the group?
Sure. Thanks, Joe. My name's Todd Lindsley. I joined yesterday. I happened to be perusing around LinkedIn, and I was following a couple sites. Joe's information came up. I started looking into it. I said, "Hey, this looks like a great group to join." In my passion for never-ending knowledge and whatnot, I'm a medical sales rep. I've sold capital as well as disposables and consumables for the last 22 years. Worked for companies. I've worked for Tyco, which was then Covidien. I left before they sold out to Medtronic. I work for ICU Medical now. I've worked for a couple of other smaller medical companies, but yeah, I'm just a sales rep, but have a good passion for meeting people and learning as much as I can about things I don't know and things I don't know about in the industry. So
Welcome, and I wouldn't say just a salesperson because I think you just have one of the hardest jobs on this phone.
Thank you.
Do you know Tom McCall?
Spoken like a true other sales and marketing person.
Yeah, okay, regulatory. Settle down.
I do know Tom, Joe. He's the head of the other division. I'm with the infusion side, so we don't interact a lot. I'll see him at national sales meetings,
Okay.
but yeah, he's a busy guy, and I don't have much interaction with him. I have interaction with reps.
He came to my very first 10X back in 2013, and he will be speaking in April. So he's back for our 10th reunion. Where are you based out of?
I'm in Atlanta. Georgia.
Okay, right. That's right. Okay. And John, it's been so long, these kind people don't remember much about you. So if you'll refresh us on your background.
Sure. So again, my name is Jonathan Saul. I go by John and Jonathan. I started in the pathway to become a medical doctor and decided that that wasn't the most judicious way to go, and ended up healing companies instead of healing people. And spent about 10 years in turnaround management, 5 of which were with the Gucci Group. Very, in the mid 90s, they were almost bankrupt. And what I learned in microbiology was very applicable to healing companies and making sure that their processes are in order. And then I was able to have, I guess, enough capital and enough confidence to go out on my own. And since 2000, I have been working more aligned with my passion towards health and wellness, and working with medical companies to convert their technology towards over-the-counter or other types of consumer-focused health and wellness-related technology that gave birth in the medical world. So, for example, all the neurostimulators that were being used for physiotherapy or for rehabilitation, we brought those into the sports world. So $9 million in physiotherapy sales, $180 million in the sports performance world. So that's the kind of metrics that I'm trying to play with. We just had an exit on a neurostimulator for an anti-migraine effect. That was the device was called Cephaly. And I'm working on multiple projects in multiple places, from Norway to South Africa.
John, I've got a client that's working on a device that's similar to Cephaly. So if you and I could have a discussion about that later.
With pleasure. I was there for I did the branding, I did the product development back in 2004. and open the US market and help sell the company just this year.
Okay.
What's the company?
My client?
Well, no, what was the company's name?
Cephaly.
Oh, I thought it was the name of the product, so it's both.
Well, it was STX Med, and then I think they converted to Cephaly Technologies,
Okay.
but it's a Belgian-based company.
Before we start with Nick, thank you, John. I have a friend who wrote me yesterday saying, do I have anyone in my network that is really good at software development, but understands the nuances of working within the medtech regulatory environment, i.e. complying with IEC 62304. Is that you, Alan? Okay. You made a sale. I'll introduce you.
Okay, sounds good.
Hey, Nick, educate us. Reimbursement, health economics.
It's the way you want to start off your weekend.
It is the way I want to start off my weekend. Do you want to screen or we're just going to talk?
We'll just talk.
Okay.
Just talk. So should I give kind of an intro and then intro into HEOR?
Tell us about what you're doing with LDD and let them know you're impressive. They'll be impressed enough when you start telling them stories. And my question for you to kick us off is there anything new that's happening that we should be anticipating for the turn of the decade? I know the medical device tax is looking as though it might be back on the table from January 1. Are there some reimbursement things that we should be looking out for in the 20s? So Nick Anderson, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, there's always, but I want to go a little higher level than that in terms of based off of a discussion that I just had a month ago. I've been lecturing on health economics and reimbursement for a while, and I think since about 2011 was when I spoke first to a big conference in a translational medicine symposium at the University of Utah. By the way, welcome to our homeschool room, where we have banjos and ukuleles and flags and timelines, and very little has happened in the modern era. Yeah, welcome to our homeschool room. That's where I'm broadcasting from today.
Is that a Latter-day Saint thing about modern is not so?
Yeah, it's all Book of Mormon. Yeah. So over there,
you guys are working on the fourth book now, and it's just in the intro.
We're partnering with South Park.
Mm-hmm.
So no, we in these lectures, I've been saying to people chronically that the time's going to come when venture capital is going to, in life sciences, is going to say, where's your health economics? Well, about a month ago, I had a client that I've been working with for a long time in Salt Lake, and that's exactly what happened to them. They have this great partnership with a big VC firm in Boston, and these guys are in the epilepsy space. They go back to Boston, they've had a meeting, they come back, they do that work, they go back and forth as they're courting these guys, trying to get them to write them a big $5 million check. And Mark told me in this last discussion that these guys said exactly what I've been saying at Joe's conference and other conferences, that is a real change in the tide of venture capital and life science money to say, I understand I understand regulatory, I understand manufacturing, I understand compliance, I understand those things. That's been around for a little while, but I have no clue about health economics, but I understand it's very important. What are you doing to drive down costs? I understand clinical validity, but what do you have in terms of clinical utility? Insurance companies do not reimburse based off of clinical validity. So just because I decrease your blood pressure by 5% with my new device, so what? Does a 5% reduction in blood pressure decrease strokes? And now we could all go look at the literature and say, well, yeah, of course it does. That's been well proven. But the insurance company says, that's great. Does it decrease strokes with your device? Not just in general, does a decrease in blood pressure result in a decrease in strokes? We all know that. We want to know, does your device decrease blood pressure? And if so, does it then decrease stroke incidence? So
I think that that's such an important point, because I see people who are so in love with their technology and science, and they think it's like the transitive property in math. You know, if A equals B and B equals C, then every regulatory body and every reimbursement body is going to say A equals C. And, that math does not work in this space.
It doesn't. And in fact, I have a pretty tragic example that I give in the long lecture that I give with Joe, about where I believe I was a payer. So I sat on Intermountain's value analysis committee at the hospital, but I was on also Intermountain Healthcare's payer side. And we reviewed a technology where I do believe this was a really unique product. I wouldn't base my whole company's success off of this one example any more than I'd base my career off of, well, Mark Zuckerberg did blah, blah, blah. And you go, do you really want to base your career off the 20th standard deviation above the mean? But it is still informative that I do believe that we as a payer screwed up. And A did equal B and B did equal C, but we asked the company to prove C. And this was a very unique exception to what Michelle and I just said, where you do have to show A equals B, and then you have to show that B equals C, even if everyone already understands the A equals C. Reimbursement requires you to do each of those steps, no matter how labor intensive and obnoxious it may be, where you go, Nick, how stupid could you be? I'm decreasing blood pressure by 5%. Duh, of course I'm going to decrease stroke rate. And we go, prove it. Talk to you in 3 years. Go raise some venture capital money. I ain't on your board of directors. It's not my money. Go do it. And then we here at United or Cigna or Aetna will be happy to write you a check. But until you prove that logical, stepwise logical analysis, I'm not going to reimburse you. And there are, like I described, very few examples where we will allow a leap over that chasm and say, okay, if you can prove A, then you can prove C. We get it. We'll reimburse for you. But those, in my experience, are the exception. So maybe I should go back and give a little background. So I finished school, moved back to Utah, and took a position with Intermountain Healthcare. Intermountain's an integrated delivery network, so it's both the hospital and the payer system all in one. And like Kaiser Permanente or Geisinger, and Intermountain Healthcare is the juggernaut in Utah healthcare, and in many regards in United States healthcare. And they have their own health insurance company called Select Health. Well, I showed up every day to Select Health, but I was on both sides of that equation. And a new technology, say Cephaly, for example, since we just mentioned it. Cephaly might go to a trade show in the American Association of Neurological Diseases or something like that. They go to a trade show, they put up their $100,000 booth, they have their Cephaly device, and they say, hey, you put this on your head and it fixes migraines, whatever. And unbeknownst to Cephaly, Intermountain Healthcare's chief of neurology is walking down the hallway and stops and reads a poster and goes, oh, this is really interesting. I'm a migraine specialist. Maybe he doesn't even talk with anybody at the Cephaly booth. And then he goes on his merry way and walks down the hallway and looks at other booths at the conference. He gets on an airplane, he flies back to Salt Lake, and lo and behold, Cephaly sends their best sales rep to Salt Lake, because if you can land Intermountain Healthcare, the value of your stock price goes up 20% overnight. That sales rep talks to the doctor, and the doctor goes, yeah, I saw your booth. What a cool technology. I've been thinking about this technology for years, and I'm glad to see that you're actually commercial. Yeah, I'll take 50 of them. And then he puts it on an Intermountain patient. He's an Intermountain physician. That patient has Intermountain Healthcare health insurance called Select Health. The patient shows up. He puts Cephaly on the guy's head. The guy goes home. His migraines disappear. Select Health gets a bill and goes, what the heck's Cephaly? And then goes to the internet, types it in PubMed and in UpToDate and in NICE and Cochrane and CADTH, and starts to do an assessment of this and comes up with, now John, forgive me, I'm demonizing your product and I know nothing about it. I'm using
No worries.
because we're here today.
I have some great rebuttals.
Sure, yeah. No, but just as an example, I'm picking on it because we're all here. I could pick any topic, or any technology, but I go to PubMed and I type in Cephally and I see nothing. And then I go, these guys haven't published any papers. Perhaps they have. I'm just using this illustratively, but I'm not going to reimburse for it. So then I call up the neurologist across the street and go, what are you doing? This thing's $85,000 and it has to be done every month and whatever the protocol is. You have no evidence whatsoever in a randomized prospective blah, blah, blah trial. That's the clinical validity part. And then you have done nothing in health economics to show. So in the hierarchy, if you're taking notes, it's analytical validity, clinical utility, and health economics is the cherry on top. So if you do health economics after your, we'll call it a phase 3 type study, even phase 4, and you say, hey, we've proven that this thing decreases migraines by 48% after 6 months of diligent use, or whatever the metric is. Then the payer goes, wow, that's something. But do you decrease any emergency room visits? Do you decrease surgery with deep brain stimulation or whatever the standard therapy is? And your technology versus the standard of care is what cost? So the standard of care, John Smith works through having his migraines and he goes to the ER on average 0.9 times per year. And each ER visit equals $5,100 on the commercial health plan. And then a Cephally patient works through and they go to the ER every 6.4 years with an ER visit of $5,100 or whatever. Thus, this is better than this. So that's the health economic part that companies are now being asked to do by savvy venture capitalists that either have heard me lecture on this for almost 10 years now or have figured it out, because I'm not the only person saying this, that companies in the 1990s could end at regulatory. I have a big theory on this and I'd love to write an article, not necessarily a publication on this, but I'll get asked by older people that have been doing this and made their millions back in 1993 in life sciences. And they'll say, Nick, what changed? Like when I was a salesman back in 1992, I could walk into the doctor's office any day and sell 1 million of these things, catheters, pacemakers, whatever it is. And I made 300 grand a year in 1991. Well, now I can't hardly get in the door. All the lamentations of a modern day medical salesman, and I can't get in the door, and then the physician ends up buying it, and then they call me back a month later and go, I'm not getting reimbursed. And you go, man, it's so much harder now. My thesis is, in answer to the question, Nick, what changed between 1995 and 2019 is the internet. Previously, doctor neurologists that would use this Cephally or this pacemaker, this catheter, this stent, would use it, implant it, and then the health insurance company maybe had a few internists on staff as the medical director, and they'd go, I don't know, sounds good to me, seems reasonable. Well, then in 2002, PubMed happened. So PubMed has only been around since 2002. And they could start hiring Nick Andersons to work at the health insurance company to go, Nick, you're a nerd and you know enough about medicine and science. Go read those papers and go pick a fight with the neurologist. And then I go, now we're talking. This is like my dream job. So now I get to read all those publications. I write what's called an HTA, a health technology assessment. And I say, hey, Dr. Neurologist, I don't know if you've read this thing about deep brain stimulation for Parkinson's disease, but it has a 19% explantation rate at 24 months, and it costs $80,000. Well, 80,000 divided by 24 months, blah, 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 health economics, this thing's too expensive. I ain't paying for it. I'm not telling you can't do it, because I'm not practicing medicine here at Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross. I'm not telling you can't do DBS in Parkinson's patients. I'm telling you I'm not going to pay for it. So notice what that is, especially in an integrated delivery network. It's a little bit of a gun to the head. And you go, go for it, but I'm not paying. And then they go, well, then I'm not going to do it. And you go, all right. And under my breath, I go, good, because it's terrible. The explantation rate at 24 months or whatever the data says is too high. And you're torturing these patients and getting them all sorts of, brain hemorrhages. And you're sending us the bill. Then I have to turn around and raise Rick, Michelle, John, Alan, and Todd's healthcare premium by $40 per member per month. And then they all come back to hate me. So I'm just not going to pay for it, and I won't have to raise their healthcare premiums. We're going to have to find some better technology for our Parkinson's patients or our urinary incontinence patients or whatever it is. Well, we would call them members. We don't call them patients on the health insurance side. But unbeknownst to Stryker and Medtronic and all of these groups until relatively recently, the health insurance companies had teams of people like me sitting there all day long, having meetings with our medical directors going, okay, what are all of you hearing at your big high level Intermountain Healthcare board meetings and all that? And they go, well, Nick, there's this thing called Eurolift. There's this thing called Cologuard. There's this thing called Cephaly. Sorry, I'm just picking on it because it's here. John, I need to pick a different one because I don't want to say anything that's incorrect.
No, it's a great and another topic, which is that we literally went again and said, screw reimbursement. I'll just demand the money directly from consumers, and people paid. Not only did they pay, we offered them a money back guarantee. So a commercial oriented, if you're not happy, we don't want you using the device, send it back. We got back 300 out of 10,000 units. I mean, wow. People were, and of the 300 that were sent back, I think 50% reordered them. So the fact is that we were commercially active in the US 2000 since we were commercially active in Europe since before 2007, and basically based on a direct payment. The cost of some of these things are coming down so significantly that you can actually make a commercial business. Consumers are willing to pay if they get a solution. And then as we go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and publish in Neurology and Journal of Headache and Medicine and Pain and show that actually the results are better than any of the drugs that are out there for acute use, that's when they say we're gonna we see
John,
that it works. And then
you're cutting out a little bit in there.
Oh, sorry about that.
Your internet's giving up on you.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let me know if can you hear me okay now?
Yeah, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. So I think, I know that this is a very unique case, but I do think that consumers today are willing to work with companies. There are disruptive opportunities to work with directly with consumers. They're willing to get reimbursed if you can create value. That's why I really appreciate what you said in the beginning. And I think that value assembly and value proof towards utility is really critical, whether you go through reimbursement pathway or you're arguing because you have a platform and you can communicate so quickly and so directly to the patient or the benefactor of your offer. And so talking directly to them is really easy. And if you have a good solution, you can actually make a good business before you ever get reimbursement along the way.
Yeah, and that's where at the end of this big lecture that I give, I speak at UCSF School of Medicine, and then I speak at conferences like the one Joe hosts in San Diego, and I speak everywhere. I was the entrepreneur in residence in Dubai in 2017 for a group of digital health companies. And I often talk about digital health and say, now I say digital health, this is how I define digital health versus mobile health versus telehealth and telemedicine. I won't get into the definitions of each of those, but digital health for me is the dream because you've completely eliminated the physician. And I think we're getting to that. I think the diagnostician is going the way of the typewriter repairman. You can imagine the scowls I get at UCSF School of Medicine when I say that if your primary role in medicine is to diagnose illness, I hope you enjoy your career, but please don't encourage your children and grandchildren to follow in your footsteps. Most of the diagnostics.
I have a post as well.
Oh, sorry, it's cutting out again.
I said I have the same poster as well.
Oh, good, good. Yeah, that I give this example.
Nick, in this kind of transition period, as the world is kind of digesting digital health and the FDA is slowly behind the trends of what is happening in startups, I have found like there was technology where the company had something to where a surgeon could do a procedure without doing open heart surgery. And they could go in through the vein and they could go in and treat for atrial fibrillation with a suction thing that traveled around the heart and ablated the heart, as opposed to having to do it open heart, open heart procedure. Well, they were marketing it to cardiothoracic surgeons. Guess what cardiothoracic surgeons like to do?
Open heart surgery.
Yeah. So the whole concept of eliminating the physician you really have to have the right target market. You can't go to the physicians that you're trying to eliminate. You have to go to the physicians that will start getting business from this, like interventional radiologists, and like there are other medical sectors that aren't doing open heart surgery, can't do open heart surgery, but could do this procedure. Yeah. So anyways, that's an interesting dynamic.
It is
eliminating
really
the physician, but those are also often the key people you have to get to adopt your technology to be paid in the first place.
Yeah, and it depends on where you are in the spectrum. So let me tell you how I work, what I do for a living, and then you can pass this on to your clients if you think I'm not a crackpot, despite the fact nothing happened in modern history according to our timeline. It's a work in progress, okay, everybody? I work in a building called Church and State. We own the building. It's an old Unitarian church that my business partner came in and revamped the whole thing. And it's this big co-working space, and lots of people with skinny jeans and beanies in July sitting there. And our office is in the basement. And there's 4 of us at LDD. Our company is like LarryDavid.com, LDD.com. And Ron Heffernan is an investment banker. June Chen is a physician. I'm a health economist, and Matt Toon owns a company called Altera Medical. And Altera does commercialization, sales and marketing type stuff. Matt used to be a Merit Medical, Abbott, Kimberly-Clark, Owens and Minor type guy, $400,000 a year, $500,000 executive. He was fantastic at what he did. And then he said, you know what, I've got so many of these companies that show up here at Abbott that have this new device, and they go, hey, I want to, work with you guys. And they go, we can't work with you. And Matt goes, I want to go start a company where I can help them and then help them commercialize. And then I step in and fill in the blank that says, Matt, let's be careful before you commercialize this thing. And the sales reps go this way, and there's no market access team coming this way to win over the payers so that they meet together. You need a sales team full of people like Todd, that say, I know how to get into a cardiologist's office. I know every cardiologist west of the Mississippi. They all know me, they all respect me, and I can get in their office and I can sell them something. And then the physician implants it in the patient. It goes to the health insurance company. The bill gets denied. The physician calls Todd and says, I never want to see you again. Well, it would have been good if that cardiology company would have had a market access team going the other direction, saying, Todd, Lindsay, you go get the cardiologist to get excited about this at about the same rate that we're going to go get Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, Medicare, and Medicaid excited. Hi, Brent.
Hi.
Brent Lang, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen. So that market access team goes the other direction, so that when the sales rep sells to the physician, the bill goes to the health insurance company, that the health insurance company goes, yeah, we've already heard about these guys. We love it. We have a coverage determination favorable for this cardiology technology. Great. Yeah, we'll reimburse it. But what happens is these companies come into our building at Church and State oftentimes. The president of the company excluded Brent. Brent came and met with us in Salt Lake maybe 4 or 5 months ago and understands this dynamic, because he's done this a few times, of sales versus market access. I do market access, Matt Toon does sales. Well, when you get the two of us that join at the same time, then the sales rep isn't scared to death going, I'm working my butt off, showing up at 7 o'clock in the morning to meet with this physician to sell him this new medical device. And the physician's going to go implant it in an Aetna member, and the bill's going to go to Aetna and get denied. What gives, Nick? What do I got to do? And we go, well, did you do any health economics? Did you get a new HCPCS code, level 2 code? Did you meet with Leland Garrett or Dick Whitten or Gary Oakes, the gentlemen that essentially run Medicare? Hi, Larry, welcome. Did you do what was necessary from the market access side, or did you still think like it was 1991 and that if I can just get the physician will go and poke his finger into the chest of Aetna and Cigna and say, dang it, you better be paying me for this? Because Aetna and Cigna right now will laugh that physician out of the room and be like, I don't care who you are. I don't care about the technology. I do care about an NAMCP dossier. You have a National Association of Managed Care Physicians dossier. That's all I want. And if you can hand me that and it's got clinical validity, clinical utility, blah, 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 all the Nick Anderson boring stuff, then maybe we'll be interested in reimbursing you. So all the way on that spectrum is anything from a digital health company that may or may not need my help. You may be like, great, sell it on aisle 6 at Walgreens. You don't need me. You probably don't even need Matt Toon. Maybe you do, I don't know. But go sell that at Walgreens on aisle 9 like a home pregnancy test. You don't need a home pregnancy test. Took clinical medicine out of the OBGYN's office and put it at CVS. And now you go grab a home pregnancy test that actually, ironically, it's a bookmark. You go urinate on this thing. I noticed that I looked suspiciously like one. You're like, Nick, why are you holding a home pregnancy test? That you go urinate on this, then you schedule your meeting with your doctor for an ultrasound, and you bypass the $100 blood exam or whatever Brent Lane used to do. And you skip that with the help of digital health, and you only go see the physician when you need them. So health economics and reimbursement, if I'm speaking to 10 people, 14 people in this, there's going to be 14 different, well, Nick, what about this? Well, Nick, what about a technology that does this? And it goes, and then I have to go, I need to learn more about it. What's the setting of care? Setting of care is a huge issue for reimbursement in health economics. Is your technology designed for the outpatient or for the ambulatory surgical center? And you go, yeah, it is. It's used in meniscal repair in torn knees. And you go, okay, done in the ambulatory surgical center. How much is your average sale price? And you go, about $2,600. And I go, it's a no-go. Because in the APC grouper, the billing mechanism for a meniscal repair in an ambulatory surgical center, it's probably only $5,000 anyway. And you're going to consume half of that with your technology for meniscal repair? It's a no-go. We need to figure something else out. You need to either sell this in the hospital outpatient department or in the inpatient department, but the problem is no one does meniscal repair in the inpatient department. So let's figure out the health economics of what is your technology, where is it going to be used, in what setting of care, to whom does the benefit accrue? If it's time savings in the OR, the benefit is to the surgeon. Well, surgeons don't write checks. So maybe we need to go to the surgery administrator at the ambulatory surgical center and say, what would you be willing to pay to shave 5 minutes off every one of your meniscal repairs? And they go, not much. I'm only at 50% capacity in my ASC anyway. An extra 5 minutes times 1 or 2 of these a day that we do, I'm not willing to pay anything for it. What's 5 minutes? And then we get all riled up over that and we go, well, you're going to keep your patients under anesthesia for another 5 minutes and that's going to put them into AFib in 40 years. And the ASE goes, look, we don't care. It's 5 minutes. You're not saving me much. I'm not going to write you a check for $2,500 to shave 5 minutes off of a surgery procedure. So we need to know setting of care. We need to know to whom does the benefit accrue. If the benefit is to the health insurance company, now we're talking, you're going to make money. Because Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, Medicare is going to say, hey, these guys have a way to decrease such and such by 31% in the perioperative period that will then decrease, because remember, that's clinical validity, that will then decrease per their studies, ER visits and additional operations in the next 12 months. And this number divided by this number equals a cost savings to us here at Cigna. This is a cool technology and I want to reimburse for this. So there, you can see this discussion would have been a lot easier 10 years ago when digital health was this, Star Trek tricorder fantasy. And we were starting to hear terms like artificial intelligence and big data analytics and all of that newfangled stuff. That I could just say, guys, there's this thing coming in the near future called digital health. Let's not talk about that. Let's just talk about these types of things, medical devices writ large, and we would all sigh a breath of relief. Well, now there's digital health, mobile health, telehealth type things that are muddying the discussion about reimbursement and health economics because it is changing the game. So Dr. Brent Lang, that's on the call right now, has a technology that is moving something that historically has been done in a hospital or in a physician's office to your house. And you can now do it at your home. Or you could frankly use his technology when you're out at lunch with your friends, because it's a diagnostic test that you need to do frequently throughout the day. Well, that muddies the discussion because it's kind of digital health, it's kind of mobile health, it's kind of telehealth, it's kind of telemedicine, but it's also a medical device, but it's also a diagnostic. So damn you, Brent Lang, because you're making this discussion so much more difficult in the year 2019.
And the FDA is confounded about every one of those sectors.
Yeah.
You remind me of Saturday Night Live 1976. It's a floor wax. It's a dessert topping.
It's a non-nutritive cereal varnish. So this is you can see that we're already 40 minutes into this discussion, and I want to kind of open it up to everybody a little bit. But you can see how multifaceted this problem is getting. How much of Nick Anderson do you actually need if you go, Nick, I don't want insurance reimbursement. I will never go anywhere near a hospital. I will go nowhere near a doctor. I wouldn't know a CPT code if one hit me in the head. I don't even want to know what they are. My customer is aisle 6 at Walmart. And I go, dang it, I wish you needed me because that's how I feed my family.
This is not a fair analogy. Everybody needs Nick Anderson.
Thank you. But what if I had a device? I use this example all the time in that lecture. What if I had my cell phone here and I have this thing that I plug in it and I breathe in it and it tells me, we've got some feedback, and I don't know if that's, maybe I'll turn me down.
It was Jonathan. I muted him. Sorry, man.
That's okay. What if I breathed in that and it ran an ELISA test and said, Nick, you've got strep throat. And I go, awesome, because I don't want to go to the doctor's office. I feel miserable. I have 102-degree fever. I don't want to get all of you sick in society as I go down to the doctor's office. For what? For him to use a big Roche diagnostic device that he paid $100,000 for that's sitting over there, and he swabs my throat and sticks it in it, and it tells me I have strep throat. Well, why would I pay you a $100 office visit, drive all the way across town to get done what I could do with my digital health thing right here in the comfort of my own living room and go, yeah, I got strep throat. And then Amazon goes, would you like that delivered, your amoxicillin? Yeah. And then a drone brings it to me this afternoon. I used to give that example. I gave that example the first time. I didn't say Amazon, I said CVS. I gave that example the first time in 2011 at the University of Utah. And even the students in the graduate bioengineering program kind of snickered, like, ha. Are any of us snickering now? This is happening. This is absolutely happening right now. when I'm going to urinate on this thing and it's going to say, Nick, you have a UTI. Oh, and by the way, you use Biomeme that Mark Cuban is supporting in Philadelphia. And Biomeme, you ran a Biomeme on yourself, and we know that you have this polymorphism on cytochrome P450, and you shouldn't get amoxicillin, you need vancomycin or whatever. Would you like that delivered this afternoon on same-day delivery by Amazon? Yes, please send it. I don't want to leave my house. I feel miserable and I have to go urinate every 5 minutes and it hurts. That no one's really laughing at that anymore. But just in the dark ages of medicine back in 2011, people were laughing. And now it's like, man, I just bypassed health economics. I just bypassed all of this kind of stuff. I don't need reimbursement. So thank you, Joe. But in those examples, you may not need me if you're a diagnostic test. Now, if this thing is a implantable that goes into the mitral valve, different discussion. You need me dearly. You need all of my partners at LDD. Furthermore, we have our own venture capital fund. We're starting our second fund right now, a $25 million fund. Tell your friends. Raising money for that right now. It'll be strictly life sciences. We'll be based in Salt Lake, but we're not specific to investing in Salt Lake. But what we're doing is closing this gap, making this ecosystem. When you show up to us in Salt Lake City and you go, Nick, I've got this cool thing. I'm a bioengineer. I got $100,000 in grant money from the NIH. And we all look at it and start salivating and go, this is cool. Ron Heffernan, do you think you could go raise him 2 or 3 million? Or we put it in from our own fund. Nick, you do the health economics. Matt, you help with commercialization. June, you help with the value message. And now you have one-stop shop with LDD to take your product from bench to bedside. So I'm going to be quiet and turn it over to far more Q&A than I've allowed. But for a topic like HEO, health economics and outcomes research, it requires quite a bit more discussion than it would, I think, if I was talking about a concept everyone's already very familiar with.
I think
I've
I
got a
speak for the
question to dumb down the conversation a little bit. This is partly to check my understanding of how reimbursement works. So I just recently did diligence on somebody who was pitching to our local angel group. And it was like this headset that bilaterally cleared impacted earwax. So it sounds simple enough, but right now there's nothing that can do it bilaterally. So it takes twice the amount of time in the physician's office. In the pitch, they were saying things like, oh, we're going to get a 510K because we want this to be for prescription use, even though it was under a code that's 510K exempt. And they're like, we're going to get 510K because we don't want it to be OTC because we want reimbursement and we need a 510K to get reimbursement. And I was doing the diligence with a practicing physician inside assisted living homes where they actually have to do this procedure fairly regularly. And he said, and he's like, you know what, Michelle, I can use a bobby pin if I want to. And I can get paid the same amount of money as if I use this fancy headset or if I use the other devices that only do one ear at a time, whatever, I'm still just going to get the $50. It's just the sale to me is two things that I can do. This procedure is 45 seconds instead of 30 minutes and that the patients are more comfortable. So like, is that understanding right? Because I hear that over and over again. And John, the client that I'm working with the electrostimulator, he's saying the same thing. I found a 510K product code, and he's like, that nails his indication. He's like, I don't like that one because the physicians don't like those types of devices and it can't get reimbursement. And so just because he doesn't like an FDA product code, he wants to do a de novo for reimbursement. And I'm like, these things are disconnected to me in my mind. Is my understanding limited here?
No, and I'm glad to hear you say this. In my opinion, no. You're as confused as I am on that kind of stuff. And the reason why you get reimbursement when you have an earwax impaction device that you want to bill for is you go, well, I can get $100 from Aetna, but I can only get $4.99 at Walgreens. And so I'd rather have the 100. And you go, well, then do you understand that you're going to have to do a $900,000 prospective randomized study to prove that your earwax impaction device is better than a bobby pin? Or we have a device here, my wife and I bought, that's just a squirt bottle and it goes in your ear with a little tube and it cleans out your ears. It costs nothing on Amazon. And that I get what the doctor's going to laugh at that in the assisted living place and be like, I know the game you're playing. You're trying to squeeze out more money out of Aetna when clearly you're a device that should be sold at Walmart. So Michelle, let me make one point obnoxiously clear that I don't want to confound. I don't want anybody to be confused about. Reimbursement and regulatory could not be in more separate, distinct spheres. What Blue Cross Blue Shield did a few years ago, you can go look at their criteria, just Google search it. They used to have this thing called BCBS Tech that's now called Evidence Street. It's a great group of people in Chicago that do health technology assessment type stuff. And they listed out 5 criteria of what you must have at a base minimum to be able to get reimbursement from BCBS. And one of them is a net improvement in healthcare outcomes. One is appropriate regulatory approval from whatever, whether it's CLIA or FDA or whatever it is. And they have 5 of these. Well, when I was a payer, I really didn't care much about your FDA. It was a box to check. Now, Michelle, being an FDA, you have to have FDA, whether Nick Anderson likes it or not. That's how the game's played, Nick. So this is not a disparaging comment about regulatory affairs consultants or regulatory. That serves this sphere that you must do if you want to play in the medical world. And if you don't do what Michelle Lott tells you, you're going to go out of business. Then you come talk with Nick Anderson, and Nick does his thing in his sphere of expertise of reimbursement and health economics. And those 2 things may not line up. Michelle may look at, a regulatory consultant might look at this thing and go, hey, this is easy. This is a de novo 510K, do 15 patients. It'll take you 6 weeks. It's earwax extraction. How hard could this be? Go get a CRO to run the trial for you. And then Nick Anderson shows up and goes, that's great. Michelle did her job. What a great, that was money well spent. And you will get a de novo if she says so. She's the expert, but you'll never get reimbursed. You're dead in the water. If I were you, I would get 510K clearance, spend all the money you were going to spend on clinical trials on a television commercial during the nightly news with Lester Holt, and just sell it at Walgreens. You don't need Nick, because you're never going to get a new HCPCS code for earwax extraction. Judy Wallace at CMS is going to laugh you out of the room. You're going to spend $900 grand to go do clinical trials for removing earwax that you could use a bobby pin for. So I again give that as an illustration of reimbursement and this are in such separate and distinct spheres. It's incredible. And people will too often lump them together and say, well, if I get FDA approval, Nick will reimburse me. Nope. I reviewed 151 technologies. I wrote 151 health technology assessments in 7 years, 1 month shy of 7 years. And I denied coverage for about 50%. I think it was 52%. I kept a tally of everything that I did post facto. I didn't do it while I was doing those assessments. And of diagnostic tests, I denied 66% of all of them that I reviewed. And almost every single one of those were FDA cleared or appropriate regulatory body cleared if it was CLIA. So wait a minute, Nick, if the FDA gave me a 510K class 2 distinction, said that, hey, you're good to go, we deem you safe and efficacious, and they knight you and say, you may go to market, then why did Nick deny you? Because I can't deny you for health economics. Health economics is cherry on top after you've done clinical utility studies. So since I can only deny for investigational, experimental, or not medically necessary, why did I deny you? If the FDA said that you were safe and efficacious, then the product comes to me, I may look at it and say, you're not medically necessary, you're investigational, or you're experimental. And though the regulatory affairs consultant did their job and you paid him 150 grand to be your regulatory expert for 2 years while you went through this, that was money well spent, because had you not done it, you wouldn't have been FDA cleared and you'd have no product whatsoever. You then come to the health economist reimbursement people and we go, you know what? I think you do have a class 2 device that is designed for skilled nursing facilities. I think your technology would be really good over here in the ambulatory surgical center. So good thing you got your FDA clearance through Michelle. We need to just change your setting of care so that you can get reimbursed. Are you okay going from SNFs to ASCs? And they go, yeah, fine by me. Great, you're going to be a millionaire. But the regulatory approval will not get you reimbursement. It's oftentimes a fundamental thing, not always. I actually reviewed ketamine for the treatment of depression. Now ketamine, they have that nasal spray thing. It's ketamine spray for depression. When I reviewed it in 2014, it was an infusion. Well, ketamine's not FDA cleared for humans. It wasn't at the time. It's an animal anesthetic. And but there was evidence that it did work pretty well. We didn't end up covering it for, we don't have time to discuss, but that was not FDA cleared, but we as a payer, we were looking at reimbursing for it. So FDA clearance sometimes is not mandatory. For Blue Cross Blue Shield it is, but for other commercial payers, they'll be like, nah, ketamine's been around for 1 million years. What's the evidence for its use in the treatment of major depression and chronic pain? And then we looked at the evidence, we didn't like it for either of them and we denied coverage, but it wasn't because of a lack of or the approval of that device from the FDA. So long story short, keep reimbursement and regulatory separate. They are separate and distinct spheres. And you may knock it out of the park here and fall on your face here and vice versa.
That was awesome. Thanks a lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Oh, I didn't know we could do that. I thought it was a maximum of 9 pictures. I now see 10. We
Larry,
have, having known Nick now for years, and he's consistently one of the most sought after speakers at 10X, and his workshops are always full. I know that this could easily become a 3-hour event. Now, I suspect that not everyone has 3 hours today. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, you come, you go, you don't have to say hello or goodbye, you just jump in and jump out. It's all good. We're recording everything. Hey, Glenn. And welcome, Chuck, for the first time. He's a first timer. Let's put your mic on, Chuck, and say hi, because I at least like everyone to say hi the first time. We got your voice?
Can you guys hear me?
Hi,
Yeah.
Chuck. Yeah, I hear you.
Talk a little,
Hi, everybody. I'm living in Scottsdale, Arizona. And,
talk a little closer to your microphone.
Pardon?
Talk closer to your microphone or phone. And, oh, that's nice. Okay. And tell us what you do. Yeah.
Chuck Goodman. I live in Scottsdale, Arizona. I've been in healthcare devices for more years than I care to count. Started with a company called American Hospital Supply way back in the day. What's left of that company is
Hey, Chuck. Really bad sound quality. We're all going to chip in and get you a better microphone right after this call.
You know, I may have to. Why don't I introduce myself after I figure out how to get the right microphone?
Okay, fair enough.
Joe,
Hey,
can you translate and maybe introduce Chuck for him? Because I heard he was in Scottsdale, so I'm in Tucson. I'm curious what he does in Scottsdale.
I think of Chuck as a go-to for medical device distribution and sales, and he is a champion of patient safety. How'd I do, Chuck?
I think you did better than I was about to do.
Well, now we can hear you perfectly, and I love that
great.
everybody voice, so go ahead and tell her.
Great. Well, yay, you just summed it up. I was just giving a little bit of my background. I was with U.S. Surgical for 17 years. I started out as a rep in Chambana, Illinois, and I left that company 17 years later working for Leon Hirsch, based out of Norwalk, Connecticut, as VP of Sales for the United States. A buddy of mine by the name of Joe DeVivo brought me over to a company called Computer Motion, and I was executive VP of sales for the Americas for that company for a relatively short period of time, working for Joe and Bob Duggan. And we sold that company, as you know, to Intuitive Surgical. And if I'd held on to my stock, I wouldn't be on this call right now. I'd be someplace else kicking back. I started this consulting firm with my wife about 16 years ago. And as Joe said, what our focus areas are, and I've been enjoying that, living here in Scottsdale, Arizona, and pleased to be a part of the call today.
I'll just interject that his wife is even more gorgeous than he is handsome. So whatever's going on there.
Yeah, and she's a lot smarter than me too. She's a very, very sharp lady. Carly actually, Joe, what you may not know, Carly got an offer from a local consulting firm called Slalom Consulting, so she doesn't have to travel as much, and they made her an offer that neither of us could refuse. So so she's no longer engaged as closely.
Must be nice being extra income there, Chuck.
Yeah. It's it's steady. That's the good news.
Well, if she's doing that well, maybe she can take vacation and come out with you to 10X in April, because I'd love to see her again. Again, with the caveat of this call will definitely go on longer than most of you have time today. I'm going to direct us to a single case use, because I just spent 3 days with the fair doctor, Dr. Brent Lang, and he flew me out to East Tennessee. I had never been, where the price of gas was $2.21 a gallon to my $3.49.
Wow.
And when I went to his friend's house, it was palatial, and I learned that it costs a third of my house, which is decidedly not. Anyhow, so we were out there shooting live video of his device in action. You got one of your lovely prototypes there to show the fine folks at home?
Give me a second. They're all in the box.
Dr. Lang has, I've been this excited about few devices that I've helped market and tell the story of. He has created the first and only remote patient monitoring system for urology.
What?
So presently, the older gentlemen and ladies of the call might have an obstructed bladder, or wake up 2 or 3 times at night going to the bathroom. There's no real way for a urologist to get a very clear, accurate, many points of data diagnosis to interpret what exactly your problem is, because you're not going to go to the urologist's office at 2 in the morning when you wake. And yes, you could go in a commode hat, a plastic thing which has little lines on it, and then you look at it and you pour it into the toilet and you write it down in your voiding diary, and then you have to wash it and all this other stuff. In this case, you take the device, you relieve yourself into it, it immediately flows into the toilet. There's an RFID chip. It sends the data up to the cloud, you're done. And the doctor has beautiful Euroflow and voiding data, diary data available to see every time you voided over the last week, and you can say, oh, I can clearly see your volume, your pressure, the duration, the times. So as beautiful as Brent's background wall is there, the next time we see him, it's just going to be a beach view with sea and lapping waves, and he's going to have an island to himself, because it's fantastic technology. With that set up, we are creating his page with Nick's advice, his website that is. I don't know why there's somebody I've got to mute, somebody is echoing. What is it? Let's see. Whoever it was, thank you. Oh, no, I've only got 2 people to mute, so goodbye Larry and goodbye Chuck. There, I'm the only talker now. Oh, Nick was saying that so often a company will come to him as Intermountain Health and saying, hey, I want to get my device reimbursed. And of course, like anyone else, they will go online and see what there is, and they'll go to their website, and there will be nothing addressing Nick. There'll be, hey, patients, great. Hey, doctors, now. Hey, payer, nothing. And so we're going to create a page called For Payers, and that'll be the fruit of a conversation between Nick and Brent. Some of it will happen now for those who want to listen, and help us understand how do we talk about this technology in a way that Nick as payer needs to read and process to understand, oh, okay, I get it, yes. So with that set up, Nick's mic is back on. Brent, I'm inviting you to put your mic back on. And Nick, where do we start? You know the technology.
So let me give I'm so happy to hear you say this, because it was a massive pet peeve of mine for 7 years. Now, like the biggest chest pounding I can do is to say that for all of the almighty Intermountain Healthcare, there was one guy doing this work with our medical director, Dr. Schecker, and that was me. It's a little bit of a joke that Intermountain Healthcare didn't have 25 Nick Anderson sitting in a room going through, Cologuard and ProSigna and MammaPrint and this device and that device. No, they had one guy sitting down trying to cram all this data into a health technology assessment, present that to the committee, and determine reimbursement. Well, again, a physician might go to the American Urological Association meeting and walk by Dr. Lang's booth from ClearTrack and see that device that he just showed us, maybe not even say a word to Dr. Lang, and then he comes back and then he may call up me. I don't work at Intermountain anymore. I left in 2017, but he may call up me when I was still there and say, hey, Nick, I just saw this thing called ClearTrack in Minneapolis last week at the big trade show. What do you think? Well, Brent has no sales reps in Utah. So this is the opposite example of the one I gave earlier. Has no sales reps in Utah, has no plans on selling in Utah for 3 more years because he's doing this and that trial and manufacturing and all that. He's just going to target it in Connecticut and in Florida. And unbeknownst to him, I go, wait, what was it again? Tell me that. And then I write down ClearTrack. I go to cleartrack.com. Now, Brent, in his wisdom, has avoided that entirely, and for a few very, very important and smart strategic reasons. But let's say his company was called Cologuard, if any of you are familiar with Cologuard, the stool diagnostic test for colon cancer. Well, this exact example happened in real life. And the colorectal surgeons at Intermountain Healthcare talked to me and said, Nick, there's this thing called Cologuard. This is going to be the future of colon cancer diagnostic testing, and you can do it at home and all this stuff. Well, what's the first thing that I do as an analyst at Select Health? Cologuard.com. And then you go to the top of Exact Science's website, and what do I see up here in the top corner? I see 4 physicians and 4 patients. Well, guess who doesn't pay for this? Physicians and patients. So they have 2 tabs on there for people. First of all, my dad's 83 years old. He turns 83 next month. My dad's been to like 4 websites his whole life. He's not going to go to Cologuard.com and log in and click 4 patients and read about methylation detection. Well, why did you even waste your time putting it on there? Maybe us nerds on this phone call will go do it because that's who we are. But your rank and file society member's not going to go to Cologuard.com. Every now and again, sure. I'm not a physician. I don't know how many patients are walking in. They do go to Medline or help me, the WebMD. They'll go to WebMD and that type of stuff. But I don't know that they're going to Lipitor.com and reading about LDL reduction and that type of stuff.
That's not a good example because of all the TV ads. Go to Lipitor.com and discover if.
Yeah, maybe.
There's a lot of direct to patient, but I'll tell you this, to a person, every medical device company who's ever asked me, I say, you're wasting your time putting for patients on your site.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for a pacemaker and that type of stuff, and then when you go, you get a picture of like a beautiful 63-year-old woman with her Labrador on the front lawn, and it's like, this isn't helping me, guys. I am a nerd. I do want to know the data about the pacemaker. Would you give me some data? Well, then the other half of society goes, I don't know what a p-value is. I don't know if a follow-up period of 25 months is good or not. So of all the tabs on your website for your medical device company, you need to have a for payers one. And I wouldn't say for insurance, I would say for payers, because the payer might be John Smith at CVS. And John Smith at CVS is charged with owning all of these devices and getting them on the shelf at aisle 6 of every CVS across the nation. He or she may be the payer. So if you have a for payers tab on your website, unbeknownst to you, who are medical device manufacturers and you're on the board of directors for this or that medical device company, there very well may be somebody at BCBS at Evidence Street. It used to be called, like I said, BCBS Tech, TEC, Technology Evaluation Center. There might be somebody in Chicago reviewing your medical technology on December 13th, 2019, and you have no clue. And right now they're writing a medical policy, seeing the writing on the wall going, holy cow, Cologuard is all over the place. They're in every single conference. They give a poster presentation every time they turn around. Before too long, 7 physicians at Northwestern and 3 at University of Chicago and 4 at Chicago Memorial are going to be ordering Cologuard. We need to get ahead of this thing. Nick Anderson, go to Cologuard.com. Click on the For Payers tab, look at their dossier of evidence, find out what their 30-day blah, blah, blah is and their 4 months XYZ is, and let's write an HTA so that we can write a medical policy. Even though Exact Sciences doesn't have a single sales rep in Chicago, we need to get ahead of this because it's a matter of minutes before some physician at Northwestern Hospital or University of Chicago is going to order a Cologuard, send us the bill, and then we're going to have a big headache. So when you're developing your medical technology, please also develop your For Payers tab on your website that people can start to click on and see all of the studies you've done and parse it out, studies you've done and studies that others have done in your space. Because there may be a little busybody health economist out there at some health plan that you want to reimburse for your technology that's ahead of you. He's beating you to assessing your technology, and you want to spoon feed him all the information you can. Now, sometimes you can't control it. You couldn't control when that urologist walked down the hallway and saw your device at the conference and comes back and gets this going. The only thing you could do is just don't go to the conference until you have the website with the data necessary to support it. Save the $100,000 booth at the American College of whatever. So I'm talking in circles, but it's to Joe's point. You need this tab on there for the people who write checks. Physicians don't write checks and patients don't write checks. Physicians will until they don't get reimbursed anymore. And patients will write a check if they can use their HSA. But the payer for big, implantable, heavy-duty, expensive medical technologies are Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross, Medicare, and so on. And you need to have a tab that speaks their language.
I get your point that there should be a tab for payers. Wow. I mean, I could have had a V8, right? But why not a tab for patients, Joe? Why do you feel so strongly about that?
No, actually, I misspoke, and thank you, Chuck. I was so caught up in what we were talking about with Nick. What I meant to say was, to a client, I have advised not to do direct-to-market advertising to patients. So, for example, I don't know of anyone who's going to profit by taking out a Facebook campaign and saying, get my knee replacement. Because as soon as they go to their hospital system and say, I read about this knee replacement, the doctor is going to say, don't confuse your Google search with my medical degree, and I happen to use this one, and thank you for your advice. Now let's proceed with it. No one's going to change I think it is such a standard deviation or two away from the mean that a patient will to choose to go to a different hospital system because of the device that they're going to use in the operation to take care of them. So to underscore,
I've only seen that happen a couple of times.
I completely misspoke. No, it's fine to have it for patients on a website. It was a mistake that I said that.
I think it's a question of awareness. A lot of brands want or feel that there's a need to create a certain amount of awareness. And then there's also the notion that there's this kind of motion towards disruptive activities. And of course, that we demonize that activity because it's the nature of protecting our territory or our turf. But eventually, you know, those things start to democratize, like the example of the earwax story. For 69 cents, you can get something that does the trick, that's safe and it's effective. But I agree, there's a place for everything. And I think the world is becoming much more nuanced into very specific categories. And obviously, you know, shockwave technology to the heart is maybe not good in the hands of the average person. We'll see. But I do think that where you're creating value, you should communicate that value. And if you're creating value for the payers, you should communicate that value. If you're creating value for the patients, you should communicate that value. And if you're creating value for the user or the practitioner, you should definitely express that value. People need to know that there's value being created with the device.
Agreed.
I think a lot of that originated in the 90s. I lived through the miracle at US Surgical when we went from 350 million to $1 billion in 18 months. When we introduced the devices for minimally invasive surgery, it was the patients that walked in and started to demand our products. But what people don't know is that a guy by the name of Michael Will, the late Michael Will, actually changed our call pattern. And when we followed that, that's when the industry turned, because we couldn't get the technology to stick. We started calling on payers. And when the payers heard, oh my goodness, wait a minute, this patient can be back on their feet in 48 hours instead of 6 weeks. When the payers got on board, and it was the first time somebody actually made sales calls on payers with a product in their hand, when the payers got engaged, the industry turned, the war stopped, the pushback stopped, and we got flooded with people needing to be trained. But that when you think about, why go to patients? It was that miracle that happened way back then that so many companies try to repeat. You know, I think it was kind of a perfect storm. It's kind of hard to duplicate, but it was wise for Michael to have led us to call on the payers, because it changed everything. When they said, we're going to start writing checks for open procedures and we're going to start writing checks for lap choles, the ball game changed.
You know, I want to, if I can, I'll make one quick point. It's a kind of a personal vendetta type thing that I have, but I think I have a captive audience that's interested in the same stuff that I am in terms of fixing healthcare and that type of thing. A point that I make frequently is that I don't understand why health insurance companies get so demonized, and I get irritated when medical device companies join in the fray, and you'll see it on CNBC and Jim Cramer and that, and they know that Aetna's watching, but they still can't help it but to say, like, you know, well, the big payers are you know, pains in the butts and they won't reimburse for our technology. And you go, in the field of health economics, there's really 5 main players, but of the 5, only 2 have a vested interest in keeping the patient healthy: you, the patient, and the health insurance company. So down the street, and I talk pure economics, that a physician, Martin's Collision and Repair is down the street, about 2 miles down the street from me, They have a direct economic incentive for you to get drunk on New Year's Eve and wrap your car around a telephone pole. Now, they're never going to go out and do an ad campaign about that and say, dear everybody, get drunk and smash your car so that I can fix it. But the fact of the matter is they make money when people wreck their cars.
They would get a lot of press if they did that, though. I think there is a marketing campaign in that.
I'll send them your way.
Just think of the same thing. You got ice water for blood. That's not nice.
But Geico car insurance, on the other hand, has an economic incentive. Now, whether it's a direct incentive or indirect incentive, we can go back to economics 101. But they can come back, Aetna can say, please don't get drunk, be careful, drive the speed limit, slow down in the snow, so on and so forth. And yet they're the ones that we all go, oh, it's those darn insurance companies. Well, wait a minute. Those darn insurance companies want to keep premiums low. They don't want outlays of cash for anything that is unnecessary. Well, the same thing goes for Aetna and Cigna and Medicare and all of them. They say, we want you healthy. We want you to eat fruits and vegetables and go for walks and go to bed on time and wake up early and have a good day and health and wellness, health and wellness. The hospital has an actual incentive for you not to be healthy. Now, whether they act on that, no hospital's injecting you with C. diff. They give it to you otherwise. But, no hospital is trying to keep you coming back, but they have the incentive for you to come back. Now, Medicare's tried to do things where they have a 30-day readmission rate penalty where they punish you if your patient comes back within 30 days. They've tried some of those things, but it's actually the health insurance company that goes, I want you healthy. Now, most people would say, well, then, Nick, if you have such faith in health insurance companies, wouldn't they be incentivized to not do colonoscopies and not spend any money on you? And you go, well, no. If they can do a colonoscopy that finds a polyp that prevents cancer they would have had to pay for, of course they want you to have a colonoscopy.
Nicholas,
For the evidence.
You mentioned readmission, and I was waiting for you to talk about it, but you were almost dismissive about it, as though, yeah, that's nice, but it doesn't really work. Was that your inference?
It's solving this much of the problem. 30-day readmission rates for a guy who's had a meniscal repair, that's a very small, it is a step in the right direction, sure. But does everybody want to know my billion-dollar idea? And if any of you run with it, just invite me to come along with you. When a physician graduates from medical school, then they go to residency. When they finish residency, they get a job at Aetna as an Aetna surgeon. They don't go to St. Mark's Hospital, they go to Aetna. Now, I'm going to go to the chairman and CEO of Aetna, and I'm going to say, sir, I'll do this in the reverse order, and I'll say, I suggest you build a 500-bed metropolitan hospital in Salt Lake City on 5300 South, just across the street from Intermountain Healthcare, and you write Aetna on the top. And now, when all these young, smart physicians are graduating and finishing their residency, they'll come get a job here. You're going to hire 5 neurosurgeons, 5 urologists, 6 OBGYNs, 4 da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And now, when a health insurance patient with Aetna health insurance shows up, they come to your hospital, there's no question as to whether or not the device is going to be reimbursed, because the only thing in the supply chain are things that have been covered and assessed by a health technology assessment. The surgeon goes, now my incentive is aligned with the health insurance company. I work for them. I'm put on a flat rate salary. There's no RVUs. There's no CPT billing. That the physician goes, I graduated from residency. I'm a well-trained resident. I'm going to start out at $350,000 a year as an orthopedic surgeon here at the Aetna Hospital, not the St. Mark's Hospital.
Did Kaiser beat you to this idea?
Sorry?
Did Kaiser beat you to this idea?
Kaiser's still integrated. You need to have Kaiser Permanente insurance at a Kaiser Permanente facility. I had a discussion.
You know, they are in fact 3 separate corporations. I mean,
Yes.
they're under the banner of Kaiser, but they are officially they are 3 different companies.
And they will have 3 different incentives. The hospital will say, keep those suckers coming back. I pray they get drunk on New Year's Eve and ram their car into a pole so we can fix them. And the insurance company will say, I pray that they don't. And then the third company will have their incentives. What I'm saying is where it's all in one roof, one CEO, one corporation. When you graduate from residency, you go get a job at a health insurance company as a surgeon, as an OBGYN, as a physical therapist, whatever you were trained in. And Aetna owns you and you get a salary. And now Nick Anderson, OBGYN, versus Dr. Brent Lang, OBGYN, we're going to compare Nick and Brent's outcomes at the end of the year. And Nick had a 17% revision rate of whatever hysterectomy. Well, can't have a revision rate with a hysterectomy. 17% revision rate with something, but Brent only had a 3% revision rate. Brent gets a $100,000 bonus. Nick gets fired.
So Brent starts cherry picking and lemon dropping so he gets paid.
I don't know. What's he doing now?
Absolutely.
Cherry picking and lemon dropping when he has to. I mean, it's becoming an issue. That's I like the idea on the surface, but the reality is that it's still fraught with challenges. If you're saying people are going to chase the money, which that happens, I'm not going to take a patient that's not going to have a good outcome. I'm going to cherry pick. And if I get a knucklehead that's not going to follow along, I'm going to lemon drop. So I'm going to follow getting paid rather than delivering the kind of care that I need to deliver of the patient who happens to walk in the door. I've got to cherry pick and lemon drop in order to get the right patient. And in most areas, in a lot of metropolitan areas, that's a very tough thing to do.
And what you do is you raise that guy's health insurance premium through the roof. And you'd say, you've got a BMI of 50, you smoke 2 packs a day, your cholesterol's through the roof, pick
Right.
Nick or Brent, and your healthcare premium's going to be $4,500 a month.
And
See,
you're going to
now,
say that to who?
I would say that to everybody who's not bound by political correctness. And I would say, how dare you dump your metabolic disaster on society? We're going to raise your monthly premium just like I would an alcoholic who keeps driving his car into a telephone pole.
Nick, but here on Earth, I mean, a third of the American population has pre-diabetes. 32 million Americans are diabetic. And I mean, we got an issue here, and that this sounds good on this screen, but in the real world where people are trying to figure this out, that just, I mean, I wonder if that would get the first
If I can
bait.
jump in here, if I can jump in here, I have some thoughts on this as well. I actually write about this in my book. Okay. I actually have a chapter in my book that just came out on 3 ideas for health reform, and one of them is in this area. By the way, I have a pretty bad cold, so I apologize for that. Part of the problem on preventive care is that sometimes I'd say more often than not, the benefits don't show up for a fairly long time after the intervention is offered. So for example, smoking cessation, it may take 2 or 3 years. If I'm a heavy smoker and I quit smoking, maybe a couple of years before my health status improves and theoretically my healthcare costs go down. So if I'm Aetna or any insurance company, the incentive for them to pay for me to stop smoking may not be as great as it should be, because they don't know if I'm going to jump over to Blue Cross next year. So I'm not a real proponent of lots of regulatory things, but what I suggest in the book is that we have some publicly funded research that identifies which preventive approaches are both clinically effective and efficacious and economically effective, because not everything, you need to have both. Just because something is effective clinically, it may not make sense economically, and vice versa. So identify those things that meet both those criteria, and then mandate that as part of your benefit design, that every insurance plan include those activities that are effective and efficacious as a requirement. And therefore, if I switch from one health plan to another, I'm inheriting the benefit from another company, but they may be getting and forgive me for rambling on here, I'm not feeling very well, but I think you get what I'm saying. If everybody is required to have this type of care, then it doesn't matter. It's a market share issue whether or not I, as the insurance company, am benefiting from the money that was spent on the preventive care.
So notice I've gone purposely away from medical technology commercialization, which is health economics and outcomes research. Prove to payers that you're doing what you say you do and you'll get reimbursed. Get the appropriate codes if you need to. Reimbursement is important for products that for whom the main customer is the insurance company. And what I've done now is shifted it to what is always the inevitable discussion that comes, especially at that UCSF lecture where people say, Nick, you're a health economist. I don't do public policy. I'm not interested in public policy, but I can't help myself, given my genetic makeup as a health economist, to say, what is the solution for these big problems? Because if we keep having to pay Nick $100,000 for his advice on how to commercialize the technology, doesn't that just add to the escalating healthcare costs of medicine? And yes, it does. It keeps going up and up and up. And then we have legislation that comes in that tries to fix it with the Affordable Care Act and things like that. And as a health economist, I can chime in, though I don't do public policy. And I say, in all of insurance, in my opinion, the best insurance is car insurance. Car insurance is very good insurance. It's based on an actuarial table of risk. There's no discrimination. It's data. You're this age, now when I say discrimination, I have a hard time with that term as well, because I think we are I got to be careful how I use the word discriminate. Well, you're an alcoholic and you keep jamming your car into a wall every month. I'm discriminating against you. You have to pay more. You can't keep dumping your poor behavior on everybody else here at Progressive, Geico, and State Farm. So we're going to raise your premium $17 a month because of your bad behavior. You get 12 speeding tickets every time you turn around. You pay the penalty for that. This is what everyone wants to do in global warming. You dumped 50 metric cubic tons of carbon into the atmosphere every time you turn around. You should pay for that. I shouldn't have to breathe that. And we want to punish that big factory for doing the bad thing. All I'm saying is, why isn't medicine the same? In some measure. Now we say,
I can help you with that. Yeah, I can help you with that. Part of the reason why there's a book that came out. A friend of mine at Zimmer asked me to read it before we had a conversation about a project that they're working on, Hillbilly Allergy. And what's going on in Appalachia and the food deserts, and the fact that these Americans don't have access to health care. And when Zimmer went and sat down and had a conversation with them, and 75, 80% of the people in the room were overweight, the diets that they have, these challenges that they have. Years earlier, I had a meeting at the University of Chicago. These folks put a push pin in at the center of the hospital. I grew up on the South Side, not that far from that institution. And they draw a circle around there for about 15 miles. They know everything about that population, and they have to come up with real life strategies as to how they're going to care for those people, because they're going to show up in that emergency room. They're going to show up for care. And logically, that I used to take that same tack, and I would go toe to toe in debates with folks about it, because I think that people, who don't take care of themselves, they ought to pay more. But does a person who lives in Appalachia and doesn't have access to the same activities? They're in neighborhoods that people can't walk in. The doctors say, hey, listen, I'm a patient at Mayo Clinic, and I'm spouting off at Mayo Clinic until somebody at Mayo Clinic straightened me out. They said, Chuck, we have patients who come here. He said, you come here, you can go jogging at your gym. You got all these options. He said, we have people who come here that we have to take care of that don't feel safe going outside to walk in their own neighborhood.
Yeah. Do
they pay more for health insurance because of this? I mean, this is complex. This is really, and I'm not, there's smarter people than me who are working on it, because I keep coming up with these answers that, hey, they ought to pay more. I have a niece, God bless her, who is significantly overweight. She went from pre-diabetes to type 2 diabetes. And I'm like, what are you doing? How is this happening to you? And, so should she pay more? Should her employer pay more? Because that's who pays. These are, her employer is paying for her to go to the gym, and now she's going to the gym. I'm just saying that the complexity goes so deep. And when I get into debates, whether it's at Mayo Clinic or I go toe-to-toe with the folks at Zimmer, and they're writing checks for doctors who will go to those areas to treat patients, and they're not blowing it up and making it into a PR campaign. They're just doing it. And I got to say hats off to those folks, but man, oh man, it's complex.
If 3 weeks ago, I was on a panel for Roche in New Orleans, and this topic came up, and a gentleman said, Nick, I can't get patients to come into our hospitals in Midtown Manhattan because no matter what kind of digital health, digital medicine type things we do with them, because their brother's in the next bedroom smoking crack, and he doesn't want to leave him alone to ravage and pillage his apartment while he's out seeing the doctor.
Or smoking cocaine, or one of the two, eh?
Yeah. So I get this. Let's go back to one level back and say, what if Aetna opened its own hospital?
Okay.
Now, the details of all these things, of course, there's going to be a million details, but in Appalachia, smoking is something you are personally responsible for. That's not whether it's a genetic component or not. There is some of this stuff that should be actuarially adjusted, and patients should be responsible for your niece that's overweight and things. Sorry, I feel badly for you. Society can't keep paying for this. So what are we going to do? When you show up here, niece, at the Aetna hospital to see an Aetna physician with Aetna health insurance, there's no out of network, there's nothing. Aetna would then have an incentive to work with your niece and say, what is it? And she goes, my brother's smoking crack in the bedroom and it's stressing me out. And they go, okay, now we own you as a member. You're part of our country club. We are going to work with you. It's not going to be your employer. It's not going to be anybody. You have Aetna health insurance, and you come to an Aetna hospital, and we have all the incentives in the world to help you quit smoking, eat better, exercise, on and on and on. We own your health care, and you having a BMI of 65 and you smoke 5 packs a day and you eat whatever the thing is, it may not be any of that. My mom's overweight. Don't tell her I said this to a group of strangers, but my mom's overweight and eats incredibly well, hasn't smoked a cigarette in their life, never had a drip of alcohol, nothing. And it's genetically who she is and a few other things.
So she should pay more.
If actuarially we look at her blood pressure, we look at everything and we say, something's missing, something's happening, what are we going to do with you? Because you are costing everybody more money in the same way that coal factory down there dumping pollution into the atmosphere is costing everybody more money in some respect or another in global warming, if we talk about that. If they should pay, and if the alcoholic ramming his car into or if it's not an alcoholic, he's just a crappy driver and he keeps ramming his car into a telephone pole, what are we going to do to work with you? How are we going to solve this? Well, one major solution for this is when you take the physician's name tag off from the hospital and you put on a health insurance tag. And he goes, hi, I'm Dr. Anderson. I'm an OBGYN here at Cigna. Right. And you go, what, an OBGYN at Cigna? I thought you guys were just a health insurance company. And the bill's not going to Cigna. Everything's done in-house, owned by that. Now, people have tried to do this in concierge medicine to actually pretty good acclaim, and it's worked well, good outcomes. But what I'm saying from a health economic standpoint, if insurance companies and patients are the only two in health economics that have a direct incentive to keep the patient healthy, then why not have the physician who has the training and education, who knows well how to keep a patient healthy, have them work for the health insurance company and quit it with the charade that they work at the hospital. A hospital's mechanism is to pull money away from insurance companies. And then they call themselves St. Mark's after an apostle so that we don't recognize the fraud. That if it was, if we called the hospital what it actually is, call it Cigna, call it Aetna, and Cigna Hospital's on 4th South, Aetna's hospital's up on 2100 South. We got this over here and this over here. And when you get sick, you go to that facility and everything's included. There's no out of network. There's no Nick Anderson going, well, that shouldn't be reimbursed and this and this and this outside of a health technology assessment. Incentives become realigned. And now that hospital, which is the health insurance company, owns that patient. It's what Intermountain, Kaiser, and Geisinger have tried to do for years, but they still separate the health insurance company from the hospital, and now you have misaligned incentives. If we had them all involved, if it was one genuine company, not under an umbrella of Intermountain Healthcare, I've said for years, Intermountain needs to go to all their buildings, take the name Intermountain Healthcare off, and put the name Select Health up. And all of a sudden, the light bulb goes off for all those surgeons, and they go, wait, I have a budget? I have to live in a world of finite resources? I have to be careful how I spend money? I can't just get a pacemaker for 30 grand that I know darn well's 5 grand. It realigns all sorts of incentives. Intermountain Healthcare, when they buy this device from Medtronic, they buy it for $3,000. They turn around and they bill their own health insurance company 3 to 5x. And I'm the bad guy at the health insurance company. So they buy this for $3,000. I get a bill for 15 grand. And I go, I guess we're all part of the same happy family here. Doctor, here's your $15,000 for this device. I then have to turn around and raise everyone's premiums $12 PMPM to make up for that. It's not me. Why would I raise the price that I have to reimburse 3 to 5x? The hospital does. And the hospitals will say we do it because we have to cover non-insured individuals and people that don't have health insurance, and we have to get that money from somewhere. I get it. I understand that in some measure, whether I agree with it or not, I get it. But they do that on, there's no way Intermountain Healthcare is treating that many people that it requires a 300 to 500% increase that they're reimbursing, that they're asking to be reimbursed for this device.
Yeah, I think we are vehemently agreeing, Nick. Yeah, you make a good point. It's just the execution, I think, is really going to be a mother.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Nick, I agree with your concept.
Yeah.
A physician who practiced in Appalachia for 33 years, up to 2017. I mean, the obesity issues there are unbelievable. I mean, I think Joe saw it this last week. And then the physician said, well, is tasked with trying to help change that. So I've got 40 patients in a day, and I'm running an hour behind. And now it's, I got to talk to you about your obesity because you're 450 pounds. There is nothing I'm going to say to that woman in 45 seconds or 5 minutes that changes anything. And let's say I say, to hell with it. I'm going to take the time to make a difference here. I spend an hour with her. Then I walk her out to the waiting room, and there's her fat husband and her overweight kids, and grandma's sitting there with a Bojangles biscuit, and a Pal's sweet tea, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to spend all the time with her. She's going to roll her eyes for most of it. Going to walk home, go home, and nothing's changed. So the real problem is, I think, it's extraordinarily hard to change bad lifestyle decisions. And probably 2/3 of our healthcare costs are bad lifestyle decisions, be it smoking, obesity, don't wear your seatbelts, whatever. And those are extraordinarily hard. Who's going to do it? I couldn't, I'm not practicing anymore. I couldn't do it. I had to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and it still wouldn't make any difference on these people. So until we have a way of moving that dial, it's somewhat difficult to change the dynamics underlying all these problems.
So Brent, what if I were to ask, what if we don't try to change the behavior, but we try to change who pays for it? That I say, go ahead and eat your biscuit.
That's what I agree. You should give a patient a FICO score when it's a health score. So what you do is, I may have whatever. I won't tell Joe what my FICO score is, but you give the patient a score. It's a national scoring system. Any hospital, any health tech, look it up. And it's based on, do you smoke? You know, do you exercise? Are you obese? You know, what's your driving record? And you get a score. And then your premiums are based on what your score is. And the way you change your premiums is you change your score. Same as you want to go to get a mortgage. You want to go to the bank, get a loan, make a car payment. It's based on your FICO score. Now, politically, it's not likely that our current government would accept that, because that would be fat shaming, right? So that's the main underlying issue here.
So that goes back to Chuck's question. When Chuck goes, oh, sorry, Chuck's on mute. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I was muted. Brent, would you make a distinction on this score between behavioral factors versus other factors? You know,
Yes.
It's my behavior if I smoke too much. It's my behavior if I drink too much. It's my behavior if I'm overweight and I eat bad. And I ought to do something about, or somebody ought to do something about a food desert if I live in one. But if if I'm born with a congenital issue or something, that shouldn't count against me, should it?
No, absolutely not. I mean,
So
it should
be based on behaviors.
Yeah, on those behaviors that we can change. Those behaviors account for the major part of our healthcare spend. You know, diabetes eating out probably $1 in every 5 spent on healthcare.
Yes.
Smoke-related illness is probably up there. Lack of exercise. Take those 3 out of the system, and all of a sudden, healthcare looks cheap. But moving people culturally. I mean, I live in Denver now, okay? And if you sit out there in the mall and watch them walk by in Denver, the fittest city in the country, and I go back to Gatlinburg for a weekend and watch them walk by there, it's like the ones in Gatlinburg ate most of the ones in Denver first, okay? I mean, the difference is absolutely finding a person who's fit and thin in Gatlinburg, or where I practice in East Tennessee, is a rare event.
So let me make one more quick comment on this. I've got a deliverable to a company by the end of the day that I need to get on, but I want to make this point quickly. What if we didn't do the scoring or any of that? What if you did just what if I could get on the phone with Aetna and I talk to the CEO and I say, could you dedicate $50 million to building a big 500-bed hospital with a 3 Tesla MR and, you know, the best of the best, you know, this amazing building. Let's do it in Utah, or let's do it in Colorado. Let's do it somewhere, you know, Phoenix or something. And he says, Nick, I like your thesis. And I say, it's only for Aetna members. And Aetna members go, you don't change premiums. We're not going to risk stratify. We're not going to do all of Nick's analogous stuff to what you do in car insurance. We'll just keep doing the same thing. And when an Aetna health insurance member goes, you know what, it's time for a colonoscopy, I'm going to go to my Aetna hospital and I'm going to get my Aetna colonoscopy. There's no question whether or not third eye retroscope is covered. That's a particular type of device that's used, because the HTA committee already determined that that was a good technology to use. They now have purchasing power, incentives are realigned, and the 800-pound smoker is paying the same premium as Nick Anderson, who exercises every day. We'll solve that later. But right now, Aetna members go to an Aetna facility and are treated by Aetna doctors with Aetna supply chain, where Cologuard is there and Cephally and all of these devices are there because an HTA has been written and the health economics of those devices has been written, and there's no 300 to 500% markup to themselves. So I think that's a pretty good first stop. I think that if we want to solve health economic problems in the United States, health policy problems, everybody get on your phone with your local congressman. Me being the libertarian that I am, I can't even believe I'm mentioning bringing the government into it. But like Brent said, this is much more of a political, bigger discussion than Nick would ever want it to be, but no one ever asked Nick. That what if Aetna and Cigna and Blue Cross got a huge tax cut? Every dollar they spend on building a new hospital where only their members go, they get a dollar for dollar tax cut. So I go to Cigna, Aetna, Blue Cross, whoever, and I say, go build your own hospital, cost you $50 million, and you can have a $50 million tax cut this year. And Cigna patients will go there, and you now have an actual economic incentive to take care of them. whether it's a genetic reason why they're obese with diabetes or whether it's not, you now own them. They go to your facility and you incentivize them however you would like. And I think that eliminates an innumerable number of problems. When I go to St. Mark's Hospital and they go, ha ha ha, I got this sucker from Aetna over here. I'm going to charge that jerk 3 times what it's actually costing me to bilk his insurance company so that St. Mark's can continue being St. Mark's. And you go, bye, Chuck. That solves one of those major problems, I would suppose, that if I'm part of that system, I am part of that country club, and I have an incentive to take care of that country club. They have an incentive to take care of me. I'm part of that family. It's now no longer the right hand wanting to do this and the left hand wanting to do something different under the auspices, the guise, the trickery of an integrated delivery network, which most systems aren't. It's very blatant that St. John's Hospital is nothing more than a mechanism of sucking money away from insurance companies to pay for the hospital. Well, if they were the insurance company, they would behave differently. And there would be much more of an alignment of incentives, and healthcare costs would precipitously decline. The same theory goes for student loans, but we're way out of time to go into that.
I will interject here and say that, yeah, we're almost at 2 hours. I thought that we would spend an hour talking with Brent, but that didn't happen. And why am I not surprised?
I don't know.
So I felt compelled to write Todd a private note and say, this is not a usual call. They don't usually go this long. And it's just a testament to how much energy there is around this particular topic. But trust me, Todd, on the weeks where I lead it, people are in and out in like a half hour. There's just not a lot of interest.
No, I'm absolutely enjoying myself. I think this is fascinating. I know I didn't
plan on 2 hours
of the discussion, but I'm yeah, very, very fascinating. If I was Aetna or Cigna, I'd just go buy a failing hospital and just rebuild from the inside. But that's another story. But instead of building a whole new hospital.
Nick's raising 25 million. I don't know how much it costs
there you go.
to do this, but why don't we call it here? And clearly Nick, Brent, and I need to set up a real time that is dedicated to Brent. Do you have time today, Nick, or no?
Not today. I've got a big thing due at the end of the day for a diagnostic company.
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you name it. We got to get you on the calendar.
And Brent, I just got a reply back from some folks that I need to give to you. But if we can on Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah, Monday or Tuesday works fine.
Okay.
I'm almost completely open. So we'll call it here. I know Rick had a couple of things that he wanted to ask you too, but he wasn't aggressive enough, so he'll just have to follow up with you separately. But it was about mental health, was it, Rick?
Oh, the interplay between some of the new virtual mental health things and a lot of the young people, especially millennials, who are, looking for solutions, and psychologists, psychiatrists, and general practitioners, and just how that is going. Because I'm seeing it almost looks like 3 or 4 things all firing at each other or kind of trying to figure this out. And it's fascinating just listening to some of the younger folks around me. And I think there's
one another.
What you're talking about. Yeah, it could almost be a call itself.
I'm sure it could.
Yeah.
Just make sure you record it, Nick. All good stuff. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And
just send me a time on Monday or Tuesday and we'll do it.
Okay. I'll take care of it. I'll shoot the 2 of you an email.
Sounds
have a great weekend, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.